They were first elected very recently as well. You know, they've come fresh to the House of Commons, and I think that's a good thing. They have a different perspective from many of the parliamentarians that have been there for a long time. And if you join the party before 4 o'clock on Wednesday of this week, you'll get the chance to make your decision. And that's what, as a party, we believe in, that people should have that vote and should be allowed to decide the result. And the Liberal Democrats have always had that view, that it should be the membership of the party that decides on these big issues, and that's very different from the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And I'm staying neutral in the contest, so I could go on to give you a better, more detailed analysis. That would maybe give my prejudice and give the game away. So, having met both Chris Huhne and Nick Clegg here in Edinburgh last week, they were both up in Scotland, in Edinburgh, at a very early stage in the campaign. I think Nick Clegg came and spoke at Edinburgh University, did he? He was certainly... He was a week before the campaign started. Yeah, so, you know, both have been around. Nick Clegg was here the week before and then back again last week. They realised the importance of Scotland and will, I think, be good for the party in Scotland.
But there aren't that many policy differences between the two.
Well, they'll be setting out their stall. They will be preparing those election manifestos as we speak, and that will be part of the debate. There will be regular debates on Newsnight, on the different Sunday daytime television programmes, all these opportunities for them to be cross-examined. I've no doubt they'll have websites, if you email them, they'll answer your queries, and there will be differences, but they will be differences of shade rather than major differences of substance, because the sort of policies, the sort of Liberal Democrat values that I'm speaking about, they share those values. Yep.
Nicol, I think everyone agrees with you that Scotland and England have a good relationship, but having just come back to working in England, there's a real kind of backlash that Scotland has felt to be a subsidised nation. And there's a raised its head, as you know. So, I think there's an element of that also in the sort of West Lothian question, that Scotland has a better deal both electorally and financially. Is there any way to redress that? For example, looking at the Barnard formula by letting the Scottish Parliament raise some of its own revenue. I believe there's a discussion about sharing oil revenues in the Lib Dem Party. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I would say that there is nastiness, and there's nastiness that goes both ways. And I want to stamp down on that and reject that. I mean, you saw some of the stuff that went on around the World Cup and football games where individuals, even a young kid who was wearing an England shirt was assaulted in a park in Edinburgh. One of my constituents, a taxi driver from Cooter, was attacked in Aberdeen for being an England supporter. And you can get examples where there's the same sort of prejudice, not just against Scots, but people from many countries around the world. And that can happen in England, it can happen here. And we've got to stamp down on it. It's not acceptable. But I think it's a form of narrow nationalism that I don't like. Nationalism, I don't think, is all bad. There are many proud nations, there have been many proud nationalist movements. However, there is a narrow nationalism, there is a nationalism that can be very negative that I really, really reject and would say is almost pretty much the opposite of liberalism. In terms of how we change the culture, in terms of how we change the attitude in England, first of all, I would say I don't think it's uppermost in the minds of many people in England, the issue of Scotland. I don't think people in England are too motivated or excited by it. Otherwise, I think there would have been a big backlash, for example, to Gordon Brown becoming Prime Minister. I don't think there is. I think it's to do with his competence and his abilities as Prime Minister rather than his Scottishness. I don't think there's a huge concern about levels of subsidy going to Scotland or the West Lothian question. I mean, if you're Scottish and you probe them, or a journalist asks the question, you'll get some of this stuff coming out. But I don't think it's, on the average Londoner, I don't think it's a big issue of real substance. You want to come back?
Well, I mean, it's not a really big deal either. I really was trying to get into a discussion on the Barnard formula, and I should mention as well, I really feel that kind of dependency culture in Scotland in terms of power in
Sure.
a huge block plan is also
Yeah,
it's
and
not
that's-
for expanding it and not for raising it. That's my real concern.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with that more strongly, and 100%. We need to change that. We get about £30 billion a year, over 3 years, £90 billion. A lot of money comes effectively from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament, to the Scottish Government, a single cheque, 30 billion a year, spend it. That's the sort of Parliament that we have. So you've got to change that, and you've got to have more devolved responsibility, including tax raising part. We've got to have more tax raising responsibility here in Scotland, and part of that could be sharing taxes, could be some of the tax revenue from oil, for example, could go to London, some could come to Edinburgh. Same applies corporation tax. There could be a variation in corporation tax levels here in Scotland compared to other parts of the UK, something Northern Ireland, without ever wanting to be an independent nation, they want that responsibility over their corporation tax revenues. They want to be able to compete more effectively with the tax regime in Ireland and Éire. So these are the sort of changes that we could see. And the Steel Commission, the Liberal Democrat Steel Commission, with David Steele chairing it, Chris Hume was a member of it, Ian Vallance, former chairman of BET and president of the CBI in the UK. These were senior people who were appointed to the Steel Commission. They've explained how practical it could be, how it could work, how it could be delivered. And it would move us more towards the sort of tax-raising responsibilities that I think any responsible Parliament should have. Yeah, gentlemen.
Just a general question when you're looking at it. I'm an ANC man myself, so it's probably about the same time that you were now doing. It's just looking at this whole question of independence, and really it's a question of identity, and also community council, one of the worst ones as well as one of the richest ones, which have merged together in Edinburgh. That's fourth, which includes where they built in that Trinity. Looking at it from an outside point of view, it's more a question of developing a Scottish identity, which somehow has never come along. You know, there is a distinct focus on social justice here, which is very strongly with the United Nations. It's so strong with the United Nations Charter, and basically, I think you probably is a better thing to actually pick up on that. I see it a lot in schools in my area. There's a strong, it's still in limited fashion to actually go out. The international things there, right? It's very different from England. And I think you as political parties in the new Scottish Parliament, you've given a huge chance to actually do it. And I think we should get together, perhaps under the UN umbrella, because you know me, I think. And the UN is very well willing to help you with that, especially with the enlightenment. So we've got so many things that change the world for the better. And it's also going the wrong way at the moment, the environment. And even that's not what Thomas Muir said, what Adam Smith said.
Sure.
It's something to get the identity of Scotland up. Independence, nationalism, etc. You know, these are just symptoms of something deeper. And if you actually look in there, it's all there. And it's difficult for me to bring it up. But I think, I think all of you who are Scots know exactly what I'm talking about. You can look in, bring it out. It's not a question of finding something opposition with the English or anything else. Go in there instead.
I agree with that. And there's a lot more that Scotland can do. There's a lot more that, as a planet, we could achieve, that we could deliver. But there's also this temptation, I think, if you plant a new bush or a new tree, to sort of uproot the plant and study the roots and believe that that's the way for the tree to thrive and survive. And we've got a new Parliament. We were a far too centralised nation for far too long. We, for hundreds of years though, have been part of the United Kingdom. Now, after 300 years, we've got our own Parliament, we've got significant responsibility. I think we could go further. I think we could devolve more powers, more responsibilities. I think we should have tax-raising powers, tax responsibilities here in Scotland.